Again, welcome to the E-Institute's webinar series on emerging topics. Today we have a very interesting session planned on integrated urban water management, and the speaker we have here today is Dr. Manuel Marino, lead water and sanitation specialist in the Europe and Central Asia region of the World Bank. Let me now hand it over to Dr. Marino to start his presentation, but perhaps we'll test the audio, you might want to say.
Is integrated urban water management. It is a very common topic now. A lot of people is presenting this as the new big thing, the next paradigm of what we have to be doing in the water sector. I will try to make something small. This is the first one of a series of presentations which will be dealing with the topic. So I will not go into anything in depth. I will just give a brief introduction of the subject, and will try to be provocative. I will try to raise interest, discussion, and actually seed the discussion more than anything. I was just, before the presentation started, talking with my colleagues here, saying that I like the word seminar because it's seeds from for the discussion, and that's the way I think that these should work. I'm going to give some quick definitions, objectives, what we understand by integrated urban water management. I will also summarize some of the examples, like exercises, pilot exercises we have conducted here in the bank. And finally, I will give some introduction to several of the topics that are related to it, so that we can have a discussion later on how do you see it, how do you see the future for this subject, whether it's interesting, whether this is just another buzz fashion that comes and goes, or something that is here to stick. Okay, let me go quickly into it. First, where does it come from? Well, it's clear for us, at least, that there is a culture of misuse and waste in water in the urban sector. In many cases, we have seen that cities can survive with a huge unaccounted for waters of 80%, case of Yerevan, just because the water that is lost is not a non-revenue water. It is water that doesn't cost anything. Even if you can bill it, you will never get a revenue for that. So it doesn't matter. Losses are common. 40-50% is not unusual. And I always say that in the end, there are two things. Water comes from a tap, it's magic. I remember very nice stories about after the war, some European cities, some soldiers taking out the taps because they thought that that was a magical thing when they were going to take it back home. And secondly is that, have you realized that water is always measured in cubic meters? What is that, cubic meter? If you ask anybody what is a cubic meter, they don't have a clue. Cubic meter is so big. What really people understand is a liter, a bottle. I always say when we talk about the cost of water, we talk about the cubic meter. That's wrong. We should be talking about the 1,000 kilos. That's something people probably understand. So, as I said, is there any wonder why we have very little regard for this resource? So, can we change the approach? Well, I think we need, and that's the purpose of this new topic, integrated urban water management. We have to introduce new ways of doing things. We have to bring new steps that little by little will bring efficiency, and we will be ready for the future. We have to change paradigms like the one I put there, out of sight, out of mind. How do we do it? And also, I wanted to talk of two other topics that are coming up. One is water-sensitive urban design. Is that a different thing, or is that the same of the more of the same? And another one is ecosystem-based approach. You know that this is the new mode, the new fashion also in the European Union. Is it more? Is it thinking? Is it new, or is it more of the same? How we complement one with the other? That's where I want to take you into the discussion. Okay, definitions of integrated urban water management. Um, there are quite a few of them around. For me, it's an analysis, it's an instrument for to support decision. It is a new way of looking at water from a urban perspective that takes into consideration what the city is, what the city will be, what the future will be in terms of development for the cities. It affects the development of the city, and the development of the city should affect water management. How we integrate both, and probably the key word here is integrated. Uh, the four main elements of integrated urban water management. You have to think of the whole cycle. We have always been talking about the water cycle at the urban area. We have to expand that analysis. We have to look at our water from all the perspectives, from inside the city, from outside the city, local context. It's not the same thing in Sao Paulo as in Bogota, Buenos Aires, Baku, or Vienna. Each city has its own ways, its own problems, its own challenges. You cannot compare a city that is growing tremendously, like many of the African cities, with the cities that are actually shrinking. So the local context, the environmental, social, cultural, and economic perspectives that I mentioned there are key. And the last thing is sustainability. This is something that has to be done thinking in the future, where we balance everything: economic, social, environmental needs, in medium and long term. Okay. Um, what we understand by integration? We have five main elements, but I would like to focus particularly with one which is always missed: fully integrated with urban planning. Water until now has always been seen as a mix of engineering actions, pipes and pumps. It is much more than that in the future. We have to look at all water not only in question of let's hide it, let's bring it easily, but how do we combine what is the city for the future, the city capacity, the realities that we can do with the city with what we do with water, and that's where the key element is for me. In essence, integrated urban water management main objective is to help policymakers to make decisions, help policymakers and planners to make decisions that make better use, that make use of water more efficient, more sustainable. That's in the end the bottom line. I listed there quite a few things. Let me put just one question for the discussion. Is it too much, or is it an appropriate mix? Are we missing something? You tell me. We have made several here in the bank, several studies, pilot studies, and I just tried to summarize here a few of the phrases that came out of that analysis, of the analysis that we have done on the basis of those pilots. Integrated urban water management is not simple. It is something that needs to that brings a change in the mentality, that repeats many of the things we have always been saying, but tries to put them together. It's a holistic approach. It looks at the whole cycle. It includes institutions. It includes capacity building. It has to be flexible. All those things. The reality is that we don't know yet what we want to say by integrated urban water management. If you talk to different people, they will come with different ideas. Is that bad or is it right? In my opinion, it is an approach. It is more than anything else. How we define it. This is a diagram that my colleague Stefan Dahan and I prepared time ago. This is a traditional approach, what we all understood. We have three main flows of water in the city: water supply, wastewater, drainage, and how they are integrated. Well, there are mechanisms there that allow for it, and we always say, okay, yes, there has to be an environmental plan, there has to be a land use plan, and there have to be some integration between them. What is the next step? It's to think of a city as a complete ecosystem where water from one place and another are linked, and where the linkages between the land use planning and the solutions we adopt for the city affect how drainage is going to take place, how wastewater will be managed, how even water supply is going to be provided. Why do we always have to think of a pipe and a pump and a wastewater treatment plant at the end? Maybe there are other solutions. And I remember years ago, very good ideas coming forward. But that were adapted to a particular case. But that's the way to go forward, and that's what we want to bring as a potential challenge. So this is actually a challenge to think different, a challenge to think that there might be other ways that could complement the traditional system. So I'm not arguing for something radically different. Let's say, let's forget completely about the pipes and the pumps. No. But there are other things that could complement that and could reduce the size of the pumps, could reduce the size of the pipes, could even reduce drastically the size of the wastewater treatment plants, and in the end, what matters, will reduce the cost that the population has to pay in order to have this service. There are many other conceptual designs similar to those ones. This is the most common one that tries to integrate all the urban waters with institutions, with goals, quality, land use planning, etc. What is the process of thinking? What we think is that little by little we're narrowing the approach. We started with let's think of everything as a waste. Let's make sure that the city is not flooded. And little by little we're coming to solutions that are more integrated, narrower, that focuses more the thinking. That's what we try to reflect in this diagram here. So, to summarize this beginning, is a set of technologies, or is a way of thinking, it's a practice? Are the technologies appropriate? The ones that we're thinking of using have to be fixed in the whole system, or should they be applied in a smaller scale? Do we have to look at different actions separately and then try to integrate? Probably that's a good way to do it. Or should we have to address them all at the beginning? Those are questions for the end. As I said before, we did years ago. Years ago means last year. Several activities here in the bank, in the World Bank, on a pilot basis, trying to see what we were talking about. This idea started in parallel years ago in Latin America and in the anchor, the center of our institution. We thought of it in Latin America that it was a nice business development tool, but also that was the next thing we had to do. What we were doing in the water had to move to something more, and that was the idea. So, as I said, here we started three main pilot studies in three regions. Interesting, each one of them had a different approach. In the case of ECA, we work more thinking from the economics perspective. In Latin America, participation of the communities was the key thing, while in Africa, the focus was mostly on the technological issues. Now the question, different approaches, different results. Is this a problem, or this is a reality, or what should be the case? Let me give you a quick and move you quickly through how we did it in ECA. We started with a quick review, rapid field assessment. We look at data, the geographical scope. Where are we going to work? What was the scale? Where we're going to do the analysis? We use the city as an example, Baku, capital of Azerbaijan. Just to give you a brief idea how it is, 200 millimeters rain per year, growing tremendously. Mm, Formerly a desert, big problems of flooding. Can you believe it? Very high water table. Uh, a new water pipe bringing huge amount of water to add to the city, and complicated situation of growth that is being helped at the same time with the development of regional development plans. So we could put all these things together and we could look at what could be a way to influence them and to bring water into the perspective and into the equation for land development. We did a diagnosis with obtained data. We tried to put them in the GIS as quickly as possible. We tried to understand the realities of the town. We tried to look at the institutional side, how to make the people that work in water talk to the people that work in urban planning, which is not normally very easy, to the people that work in roads, because there are tremendous linkages between one and the other. All those things is what we try to do in this diagnosis phase. Just to give you a quick summary of it, we try to capture all this knowledge into GIS space so that we can present it, we can analyze it, we can work with it. I'm a fan of this instrument. I think it is great, and especially it's very good for presentation to the politicians, which in the end we have to always do. We look at the peculiarities of water in Baku, for example. Most of the high-rise buildings from the old times, all the piping in the basement, nobody cares for them, so they are leaking, and it's not uncommon to find that most of these buildings, their basement is flooded on a regular basis. So that's a reality. A reality you have to understand because, that it's different in one place and probably will not affect the other places. From there, we move to analysis phase. We try to identify impacts, development goals, how these things are linked, how the investments are needed. Try to put an idea of the balance of the city. Try to see what were the causes behind the problems. This is a good example. This is analysis that my colleague Abel Mejia did. First looking at where water was coming, how much water was being used, where water was going. And if you look at it, Baku probably uses in the order of 200 liters per capita per day, when at the same time is receiving over 500 liters per capita per day. So that gives you an idea of where the situations are in this city. We look at the goals and the target scenarios for water, for the development plan for the city, for the water utility, try to combine them. And trying to combine them, we try to identify which were the main actions that had to be taken into consideration within the water sector, but also in relation between the water sector and the urban development plan that was being prepared in parallel. So we tried to combine these two things in one. Not only integrating water, but integrating water with the rest of the development actions that were taking place in the city at that time. Finally, we went to a prognosis, look at the scenarios, look at what could be the situations, prepare a report, review it with the stakeholders and the government, and try to summarize the results of it. So in the end, we prepared a document that was presented to the government for their consideration. And hopefully the government will take that into consideration, and we will move into the next steps, and that's something we are presenting to them, and we're working in parallel in water and in urban development. So that was one of the reasons why we choose Baku, because we thought that this could be something that could be used in the future. It will not be just a theoretical analysis, but something that could become a reality. Okay, that was an approach to do it. I summarize another one that my colleague and friend David Michel developed in the case of Latin America. There, their main thrust was participatory, bringing the stakeholders, having a tremendous buy-in on the problems, on the analysis of the problems, on the decision what were the priorities, on the decision what could be the solutions. And he prepared this, and this gives an idea. To do it, 16 months. It's a little bit extra time, but okay. This is different ideas. You see, completely different approach, one place or another, by the same institution, by people that have been working together for years. So it depends a lot on where you are, and that makes a difference. Okay, that was the integrated urban water management. That's what everybody's talking about. Now there's another term that is coming around, and probably many of you have already heard about it, which is this water sustainable urban design. Well, this is an idea that has been around for quite some time. It started with integration of mostly drainage into urban planning, looking at making cities water sensitive and improving the urban ecology by integrating it to water, the water needs and the water problems. Trying to avoid that concept that I was mentioned before. Better hide it. If you hide it, you don't see it, no problem. Is it the same thing as integrated urban water management? Or is it something different? Is it something that complements integrated urban water management? Well, this is one of the questions for you to get into when we get into the discussion later. For me, let me advance it. It's something that complements it. It's one element of it. It's a focus, one parallel focus of it. What is set to achieve? What is the standard practice? Water has to be considered early. Well, that's what we always say. All water streams have to be integrated. That's what we just said for the other one. We have to improve the management. We have to improve the use. That's reduction of use, improving the demand, the supply to what is needed, and incorporating the ecosystem-based approach for decision and investment planning. That's another term that just comes up. This is the latest of the terms that are becoming fashion, and particularly in the European Union. There's a framework that has been developed time ago. This is taken from the University of Santander, University of Cantabria in Santander, which they work for the European Union. They work this system as part of their process of developing some of the programs for the European Union. They use experience from many other places, particularly from Australia. This is taken from one of their examples on how to work with the conventional systems of development or water-sensitive systems of development, how to integrate all these elements into the development of the city, how to improve reduction of runoff, through that reduction in all the investments that are needed for managing of the floods, just by changing the way cities are designed. How to combine planning and management, how to do the best of one and the other. There are tons of books written on this subject. And then this is combined with the next step, which is the ecosystem-based approach for design. Again, many of you, I'm sure, have heard a lot about ecosystem-based approach. Is this a new idea, or is it more of the same? What is behind it? Is that you decide what are the different uses of parts of the city environment. On the basis of the uses of the ecosystem zoning requirements of that, you define criteria, and on the basis of modeling, you come to what are the better conclusions, what are the better designs. Is it different from what we were talking about integrated urban water management? Nope. You are linking all the elements of water with what the city is, what the land use plan is, what the development strategies for the city are. And what the only thing you do is that you combine that under a proper water quality modeling, because you have to decide what you are going to do, not on the basis of the standards, but on the basis of what you want to get. Is it a different approach, or is it more of the same? And here I want to add one point that I will be coming and have to rush a little bit because I'm coming late. That I wanted to bring into the discussion is a risk-based approach. Uh, until now, everybody was always thinking that we have to get whatever we were planning for 100% of the time. What about considering that things can fail? What about considering that we should not be designing for 100% reliability of the different elements of the system, but once we have an integrated approach, once we have an integrated framework, we have to assign different risks to different elements of that system and combine them so that those risks are most effective for what we want to get. So in the end, this is a new dimension that was almost impossible to do years ago because we didn't have the tools. But now we have GIS, we have a lot of information, we have real-time information of almost everything in the water system, the water cycle. And on top of that, we have huge modeling, we have proper planning. What about moving this next step? Well, that's another question for you at the end of this. And I just couldn't avoid mentioning this. As part of this integrated urban water management, there are many sexy tools coming. One of my favorites is urban water harvesting. Well, urban water harvesting should not be limited to roof water. Everything could be harvested. You could harvest for different uses. The moment you look at it from an integrated point of view, the moment you look at it as a whole cycle, you can look beyond potable water. You can go and think of the overall mix of water in the urban environment, and that is one element that I always wanted to say. This diagram I put here because it summarizes pretty well that idea that everything is interlinked, that you should not have just one perspective, that you should have a very broad perspective. Tools, many. Is integrated urban water management the tools, or is it the combination of them? Is it the philosophy? Is it the way of thinking? It is the new approach? Well, that's what we're thinking of it. Okay, after all these ideas, there are opportunities. Is this just another fashion, as I said at the beginning, or not? Well, let me give you my take. I think it's a must. We cannot afford to continue doing things the way we were doing. We have to start thinking of doing different. And definitely in our institutions, we are the ones that have to have the leadership to move these forward. It's not easy because you have to combine many entrenched ideas and ways of doing things that are not what has to be done. So we have to be prepared to do things differently. I would like to highlight from that whole thing this. We have to prepare to do things differently. We have to be prepared to push for new tools, new thinking. You have to select the approach. Depends on your own particular conditions. You have to decide the scales. Sometimes not the whole city is the scale. Probably not only the city is the scale. Probably you have to go beyond the city and go into the basin. The combination of the scales with different strategies, that's what probably is the best option. We have to generate more knowledge. We have to include issues like governance into the whole perspective. We have to help develop much more the capacity of local staff. So let me give you some ideas that I've written here that I cut and paste from reports that I've been looking at, and give you my take on those. First, what we mean by this is not a close. It's not close. There is much more we have to work, much more we have to discuss. And as I said before, and as I repeat here, the focus might be different in different regions. The focus might be completely different in different cities within the same region. It is a beneficial tool, yes, indeed. And as I said before, I think this is a must. It's not a possibility. It's a must. We have to move into it. It has to be seen as a framework that helps the cities in the future, that combines urban development and water management. And here, the last one is a definition that I took from one of the papers, and which I particularly like. So I'm sure you all have this presentation, so I don't need to read it again. It is effective, definitely. The experience and the pilot that we have done shows that clearly it improves efficiency. That you have to take also into consideration the economics of it. It's not just a question of is it good or not. No, you have to move beyond that. You have to include economics in it. You have to think, what are you getting out of it? What is the difference of doing it or not doing it? And the final one that I just wanted to mention, which I just said before, is the case was the focus in the case of LAC. Stakeholder participation, buy-in by the locals is fundamental on this. There is a lot being discussed on integrated urban water management. You talk to different people say something different. But at least I think there is consensus on those principles. They have been reflected in one of the publications by the World Bank, and I will definitely agree to all of them. For me, I would like to summarize with only two ideas that I'm sure you have foreseen in what I have been saying. Is it worth it? Yes. I think that we have to move there. We cannot continue now. We cannot continue with cities like Yerevan. It is unsustainable. Sooner or later, we have to move to the next step, and the next step is to include integrated urban water management as part of our thinking, our way of doing things. And second, what is in the future? Well, in the future, for me, the big change, the big new idea that will come is the inclusion of risk, incorporating risk as part of the analysis. We cannot continue thinking that what we finance, what we design, will never fail. We have to incorporate this concept of failure. I'm not talking about risk of disaster risk management that there is an earthquake. No, we have to be able to combine the different elements of the cycle so that some of them could fail so that the others could continue. So that so that we incorporate in our analysis and planning the potential for failure on some of the elements of the infrastructure. How to do it? I don't know, but I have very clear that there is a need for people to think about it, to work on it, to develop ideas, to develop tools, so that we can go one step further in improving the efficiency of the systems. Okay, that's about it. As I said at the beginning, I wasn't going to give definite answers, definite conclusions. That was not the intention of this talk. More than anything, I wanted to put questions on the table for you to think about it, to discuss about it, and I'm more than happy to answer